everybody. I'm very excited to interview Adam Kuatt, one of my friends. And I've heard a lot of your knowledge here and there, but I have not known exactly how you do everything. So I'm very intrigued to chat with you here today.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
But before we get into it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you like this content. Thanks for watching.
So what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm an investor, right? And what an investor is it's someone who spends their money to buy like an asset, right? And their goal is to get a return of some kind. Their goal is to make money from that somehow. Specifically, I specialize in real estate. So I'm buying houses and I'm either renting them out or selling them for a profit. I also do stocks and crypto as well, but my primary focus is real estate because that's the thing I've studied the deepest.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And can you tell me more about how you got to that level of experience?
Yeah, so funny enough, for how it started for me was in music. So a lot of our friends know that when I first started in music, I was traveling around the country and I was selling my CDs. And I would go and I'd follow this thing called Warped Tour, and I'd just kind of go up to people on the lines, shove my CD in their face, and be like, "Hey, people basically buy this thing." I ended up making a lot of money at this on this one particular summer, and I came home with all that, and I was so thrilled. And I was young, and I foolishly just ended up buying a car. After owning that car for about 6 months, I got bored of it, and then I turned around and I sold it. And I sold it for $6,000 less than what I bought it for. That was just a ginormous blow. It sucked. It was just like a giant hit to the chest. And what that really taught me, that experience, was the perils of buying things that depreciate. Some things lose value and some things gain value. And it really taught me this giant lesson. And I made a promise to myself through that I was going to start buying things that started either gaining in value or things that started making me money back. And so what I did basically was that next summer for Warped Tour, when I had made my next big set of money, instead of buying a fancy car, I actually went on the market and I went online and I found a property for sale and I bought this triplex. It's up in Spokane, Washington, and I still own that property to this day. And that was a really mind-blowing experience for me because it opened up the universe to me of passive revenue and this entire investing thing. And changed my life forever.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So how would another person gain that kind of experience that you have?
Well, there's kind of two different routes to go, right? I would say that if you're just like an average Joe looking to just buy a property here or there, maybe just have like a small portfolio of 5 to 10 houses or something like that. I think that just going on the MLS or going on Zillow or Redfin and just looking at properties on there to try to use a real estate agent, that kind of standard in the box route. I think that that's a totally fine way to go. And I actually think that that's probably the best way to go for someone who's looking to keep it small time. But I think that if you really want to, go head over heels and just put everything you have into something like investing or real estate, I really think that you need a mentor. Because, mentors, they have the ability to change and impact your life forever. These are people that have 30 years of experience. They know the pitfalls. They know the rights and the wrongs. And real estate has a lot of pitfalls, and so you got to really know what you're doing, and a mentor can kind of point you in the right direction of what to do and what not to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know when I got my first house, the way that I was able to afford to have it was to have roommates that I would rent out the rooms to, and I had like a house guide that everyone signed.
Yeah.
So that there were some like loose rules that would keep us all kind of living well together, and we could all change it in a house meeting if needed. But it just kind of kept the flow of everything going really nicely.
Yeah, that's really, really smart, doing a guide. So what you're referring to is called just a house hack, right? And that's where you just buy a property and it can be either like a multifamily property, like a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, or just a normal house with a lot of bedrooms. And you're either renting out those other units or you're renting out the rooms, basically for a profit, right? And the beauty of a house hack is that you can get paid for where you live instead of paying for where you live, right? I mean, how nice does it sound to be getting a check every month for $500 or $1,000 instead of having to be like, oh man, how am I going to pay my mortgage this month, right? And there's all kind of benefits that go along to doing a house hack. If you want to learn more about house hacking, I think a great place that you can go is you can just research that kind of stuff online. You don't need a mentor for learning how to house hack. One of the greatest podcasts for house hacking, in fact, the podcast that coined the term house hacking, is the Bigger Pockets podcast. They have a ton of YouTube videos about house hacking, and I definitely think that everybody's listening. If you're interested in that, you should go check that out. But there's a ton of benefits because you get the passive revenue, you also get a place to live, and then also your property's values are going to go up in time, right? And if you live in it for 2 or more years, then you get this beautiful thing where you get to avoid capital gains tax as well, which I think is really, really key for a lot of people.
Definitely. That's exactly why I held on to the house for as long as I could, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that way you can make that profit and you don't have to actually pay taxes on the gains that you sell for. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I actually moved up to Longview Longview, Washington for like 2 years because I bought a property up there and I did like a live-in house flip, house hack kind of thing where I was fixing it up and I was renting out the rooms at the same time, and that was awesome. And I still own that property today, but I'm just now getting ready to turn around and sell it. And even though I don't live in the property anymore, I still get the benefits of the capital gains rule. With that rule, it's a 2 out of 5 year period. So you can live in a property for 2 years and you can move out of it for a year or two or something like that. And as long as you sell it within a 5 year period, you still get the benefit of that capital gains tax, not having to pay it.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you do wholesaling as well. I'm very intrigued by that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe for our viewers what that is and how you go about doing it?
Yeah, wholesaling is awesome. Wholesaling is my favorite way to flip a house because there's all these benefits that come to doing it versus the traditional way of flipping a house. So in order to describe what wholesaling is, I think it's useful to describe what wholesaling is not first. Let's talk about a traditional house flip. If you typically do a traditional house flip, you're going to be buying it, you're going to pay your own set of closing costs, you're going to then turn around and you're going to fix that property up, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to try to sell it, right? And you're going to try to market it to new buyers. And there's some pitfalls with that. Let's say the market crashes. Let's say you did your numbers wrong and you can't sell it for what you thought it for. All these dangerous factors can come in and make it so that way you can't sell it for what you thought, and you could either break even or lose money in really bad instances. Or if you make money, maybe you won't make that much money, right? So all these things can happen. And when you get that new buyer, you're gonna sell it. So you're gonna sell it to them, and then you're gonna pay your own set of closing costs, and then you're done. The beauty of doing wholesaling is that if you get a property under contract for, let's say, $100,000, instead of doing any work to it, instead of taking on the risk of all that ownership, you can start marketing it to all those buyers before you ever actually even close on it, right? While you're under contract to buy it. And then let's say if someone wants to buy that same house from you for $120,000. What you can then do is you can assign your contract to that new buyer for what's called an assignment fee, which is where they pay you the difference in between what they want to buy it for and what you're buying the property for initially. So in this instance, they'd pay you a $20,000 assignment fee. They would pay their own sets of closing costs, and you'd save all this money, and you also would reduce all of the risk of never owning it and never having to swing a hammer or do any of that stuff. It's just, in my opinion, it's a much more efficient way to flip a house.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you need any special qualifications for that?
No, and that's one of the big pitfalls of wholesaling is that there are a lot of people out there who hear about this and they get excited, right? And then they just go out there and they start trying to get properties under contract haphazardly without even thinking about it, you know? And that can be really dangerous because what can happen is these are people's lives you're dealing with, right? These are homeowners who are looking to sell their house and they're making big financial decisions. And if you're going out and you're just haphazardly getting a property under contract and you don't know how to turn around and sell it, if you don't know how to work efficiently and do that deal properly, then you can end up really screwing that person over and really harming them. So that's why I think that if you're going to really do real estate in a big way and start doing things like wholesaling, I think that's why a mentor is so critical. Because that way they can kind of guide you and teach you and say, hey, these are the right things to do this. These are the wrong ways that you would do this. And that way you can avoid harming people because there aren't any qualifications you need and people can just get into it and start doing it. And that can lead to a lot of wrongdoing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I know you do subject to. Can you tell me more about what that is and how you go about doing that?
Yeah, so what a subject to transaction is it's when you buy a property by having the seller deed it to you in one way or another. Maybe they'll sign a quitclaim deed or some form of that, and they give you ownership or give you title to the property. And the thing about a subject to, though, is that owner's mortgage or any liens or judgments that they have sitting against the property, any clouds on title, like a mortgage or a lawsuit or anything, that's affecting the title of the property stays in place. So that means you're buying subject to those clouds on title. So a really simple example of that would be if I bought your house, you deed me the property, and then I just start making your mortgage payments for you instead of all of it getting paid off at once at the time of the sale.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I love subject to. It's probably my favorite way to go about buying a house because there's a lot of situations out there in the world where somebody maybe somebody is in a position where they don't really want any money up front and maybe they want money from you over time. So you can structure a creative deal with them where you can buy a house from them for no money down. Sometimes people owe so much money on their house in liens, loans, judgments, and mortgages and things like that where if they sell it in any other way, they're actually going to end up having to pay out of pocket to sell their house. I've had plenty of sellers where the only way they could sell their house was a subject to. Because if they sold it on the market after paying commissions, they'd have to come out of pocket to pay to sell their house. And a lot of people just aren't willing to do that. And so people in those positions are much more willing to just break even. They just don't want anything, and then you can come in there, take over their payments, and basically get to move on with it and take ownership of the house without ever actually having to put up anything.
Right. So it's a win-win.
It can be. There's definitely pitfalls to it too. A big pitfall, and this gets back to having a mentor and doing it the right way, right? Because I would say the wrong way is, what if you bought that person's property and then you didn't make the mortgage payments? Shame on you if you do that, right? It totally would screw that person over, because they're giving you the ownership of the property, they're trusting you, and then for you to not make their payments would be pretty evil. And so you got to make sure that you don't screw anyone over if you ever do a deal like that. But it can definitely be a win-win for people in situations like that. I've had plenty of situations where people they're behind on their mortgage, and you come in there and you buy it subject to, and you catch up their mortgage payments and start making on-time payments, and all of a sudden their credit improves.
I know you mentioned owner financing.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, and how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so owner financing is when you buy a property from someone over time, basically. To be a little bit more technical about it, if I was to buy a property from you on owner financing, you would deed the property to me, same as a subject to, right, by a quick claim deed or a deed of some kind, right? And then what would happen as well is you would create a mortgage for me specifically, and you would kind of become a bank. And then I would just make payments to you directly until that mortgage is paid off down the road. So basically, it's a lot like a traditional deal that you do on the MLS, just the main difference is that the owner becomes the bank and finances that for you. And the beauty of owner finance is that people, if a person becomes a bank, they're a lot more flexible than an actual bank, right? Banks have rules. You've gotten loans. You understand that it's like they have debt to income ratios. They ask for credit. They ask for 2 years of history on your taxes, and they want to make sure that you fit inside this box and all that kind of stuff. What the beauty with owner financing is that you can structure any deal you want under the sun. You can be as creative about it as you want. So I could give you a boat in exchange for a house, or I could structure a deal where I don't give you any money down, just like in a subject to, but then maybe I give you a $10,000 balloon payment in 2 years. Or maybe we do a 40-year mortgage instead of just a 30-year mortgage, or maybe a 17-year mortgage, and you get my point. You can do anything. And the benefit of having owner finance in your tool belt, I would say the biggest benefit is that when you look at it like that, you can start to kind of pay more and more money for a property than what you could in a normal way. So if you're going to wholesale a deal, or if you're going to flip a house traditionally, you got to get a really good deal, because your goal is to sell it and make a lot of money on the back end by selling it for more than what you bought it for in terms of a purchase price. But when you buy a property on owner financing, you can move into it. You could also turn around and you could rent it. And so with that, what you really care about is, what is your monthly payment? That's what really matters most in owner financing, is what are your terms look like, and is there a way for me to make money on it in the long term under the terms that I'm buying it for right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the ways that could go wrong?
I would say the biggest thing, just like with wholesaling or buying houses in any way, like with house hacking, you got to do your math on the front end. So if you buy a property on owner financing and you just go for it haphazardly and you agree to pay $1,500 a month for, let's say, a $200,000 house, that might be a good deal. But if you didn't do the math on the front end, then maybe you don't know that it can only rent for $1,000, right? And so then you're stuck in this position where you're sinking more money into a house than what you're getting every month. The goal there is to know what you can rent it for, and then you want to structure a deal where you can actually make a cash flow every month. So maybe you only pay the owner $500 a month, and then you give them a little bit more money down the road, either in a balloon payment, or maybe you structure the interest rate cheaper, or you make the term longer, or you stretch the deal in some way to make it so that way you can make money on a monthly basis. So the way I would say it could go wrong is just simply not doing your math on the front end. You got to figure it all out before you close on it and actually buy the thing.
Okay, that makes sense. I know you do rent to own. Can you explain how that works for you?
Yeah, so I typically like to sell on rent to owns instead of buying with a rent to own. The reason for that is because rent to owns are what they are on a technical sense is it's an option to buy a property and it's renting it at the same time, right? And when you're renting a property, you don't get any of the benefits of ownership. So you don't get the depreciation that you can write off on the taxes. You don't get a lot of different things. And because it's technically what's called a unilateral purchase agreement, the option part of it, right, is a unilateral purchase agreement. That means that you can't technically turn around and sell the property even while it's under contract. So you can't really wholesale like a rent-to-own property. And there are gurus out there that they sell self-help courses where they say you can, but that's not true. And the reason why is because of that, because it's a unilateral contract. You can only market a property that you don't own when you have an equitable interest. And equitable interest is only established if you have a bilateral purchase agreement, which is what we were talking about earlier with a wholesale deal where you get a property under contract to just buy it outright with like a cash transaction or something. That establishes equitable interest. And then that gives you the right to go and market it, whereby if you do it with a rent to own contract, you're technically practicing real estate without a license, which is illegal. And so I never really buy properties on rent to owns. I typically will sell them on rent to owns.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of selling on a rent to own?
So I would say that there's a lot of benefits to that. One of the biggest benefits is that you can sell the property for a lot more. And the reason why that is because the biggest pool of home buyers in the entire country is the pool of home buyers who can't get a loan. They want to buy a house, maybe they have some money for a down payment, but they don't actually have the ability to go out and get a traditional loan. So these are the perfect buyers for a rent to own because you can transition them from a rent to own to financing, or you can get them linked up with a really good mortgage broker, is what I do. And you can even get them involved in credit repair, and you can get them eligible to get a mortgage during that period of time where you're doing the rent to own. And then that way they can get their own loan and actually close on it and buy it. Another
That's awesome. It's almost like you're treating the home buyers and the house as a fixer, and you can kind of work to upkeep the house and the people that way.
Definitely. And another benefit to it as well is that a lot of the maintenance gets deferred to that tenant buyer, the person who's buying the property from you and renting it, right? In a normal instance, if you're renting a house out normally, you as the owner are responsible for all the upkeep. If there's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue, you're stuck with the bill. One of the benefits of doing a rent to own as well is that because that person is buying it from you, you can, depending on your state, depending on the laws, you can defer that maintenance to that tenant buyer. So they're going to be responsible for, if that issue comes up, that they'll be wanting to fix it up because it's going to be eventually their property. They'll paint it for you. They'll do all that kind of stuff for you. And that way you don't really have to be stuck with that yourself. Another thing is that they'll oftentimes have down payment money. We technically call these option payments and not down payments. And the thing is that you're hoping that this person will come through and actually buy the property from you and become the owner of it and sell it. And you're hoping you can sell it to them at that upgraded price. But in the instance that they don't, you also get to keep their option payment as well, which is another benefit to doing a rent to own as well. Is because if they don't follow through in the contract, you get to keep that money. And so there's multiple benefits on it, which way it goes, whether they buy it or not. There's lots of different ways to make money in rent to own contracts.
Wow, that's awesome. So if anybody wants to learn more from you, how would they follow along with you?
Well, if someone wants to learn from me specifically, I would say just text me, or you can look me up online. I'm on Facebook. My name's just Adam Kuatt. That's ADAMKUATT. My website is northwestrealestatesolutions.com. If you're interested in selling a house to me, that'd be a good way to go there. But if you also want to just talk to me about real estate, you can go on that website and look at my business, and my cell phone number's there, and you can just call me or text me, and I'd be happy to chat with any of you guys about it as well.
So down to earth. That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
And is there anything else you'd suggest to the viewers if they're interested in more knowledge in this field?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing that people should do before they go, hiring a mentor or anything like that, I think that you should do as much online research as you can. So YouTube, podcasts, books. Books aren't online, but they can be with Audible. Doing as much research as possible so that way you really know where you want to go and what you're looking to do. And then if you really do want to jump head over heels, I would say finding a good mentor is big time key to it. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
Very cool. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It provided so much information for me and hopefully the viewers as well.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. I like to ramble about this stuff, as you know.